From Lopez, Carol took a right on Esplanade and a right at the triangle where Grand Route St. John and Mystery Street meet. Our next stop was a friend's, she said. We bounced along in the truck over some raised road seams and potholes, and twice the bumps knocked coffee over my cup edge to where it splashed onto Carol's front seat upholstery. The old bench-style seating was worn down and discolored in spots, and Carol said nothing but an oops, taking at least partial responsibility for the bouncing spills. At Moss, she turned right, and I wondered then whether we were going to see the friend she had visited the day I ran into her outside the market, and the day we painted. At the curve in the road is a small church parking lot and an old plantation-style villa with a gated wall around it. Just past the villa is a house with a fence and a small front yard and then a driveway. The driveway belongs to the last address before the high school and runs past a narrow home or apartment back to a quaint two-story white cottage. The driveway enters through a break in the painted cinder block wall. Inside the wall, the driveway becomes just two well-worn grooves in the grass. The long side-facing building that comes out to Moss, as evidenced by the 4 electricity meters, is a multi-unit structure. Maybe once a single-family home or perhaps an old Creole boarding house. What struck me most about the place was the landscaping. Rose bushes, pink and purple azaleas, vines of some kind running up and through a trellis, and a square fountain, a sort of bird bath with a backboard, with a cement lion's head spitting water from his mouth onto a cluttered, plant-filled frog pond. There's a break in the front wall directly in front of the fountain, presumably to give all passers-by a view of it. We crept down the driveway's dirt tracks and stopped in front of the cottage, the roof of the truck barely passing under a low canopy of branches toward the deeper end of the garden. "This is where my old friend Mr. Duggan lives," Carol said coolly. She smiled and turned the truck off. "Come in with me. You can see what getting old looks like." Presumptuous of her to assume, I thought, that I had no experience with the old. However, it was true. My parents were not yet old, and my grandparents all died when I was young. We walked up the steps to the door. A step behind, I asked Carol a question. "Mr. Duggan is your ex-husband's dad, right?" I asked her to officially confirm the story I'd heard from Phyllis and my own recent deductions. Carol looked at me puzzled for a moment as we stepped into the cottage, but knew quickly where I'd gotten my information. "Mr. Duggan's been in my life for a while now," said Carol with a half-smile. And the way she said this made me think of something that made sense in my head. Simply, what Carol has in her life today is more important to her than what she used to have. We walked into the cottage's front parlor. Ahead to the left was a flight of stairs cluttered with bags, boxes, and folded laundry. The front hall continued to the back right to a door into another room, the kitchen. And to the immediate right was a small sitting room with a TV. On the couch in the sitting room was more folded laundry, and a pile of folded blankets and bed sheets. Through the sitting room toward the back was a dining room that evidently doubled as a library and a study. Up against the large square window with the shades half-drawn was a wooden desk and a padded office chair. Tall, unused candles and candlesticks stood on the dining table, in between piles of books. While Carol went ahead to the kitchen, I sidestepped into the sitting room to peek around. It was bright and clean. It looked like the home of an old single man. Next to the TV was a VCR and a pile of store-bought videotapes. The recent Titanic, a 2-tape set, had the only visible label. The couch and the love seat had blue and green upholstery with a leafy floral pattern. The coffee and end tables were uncluttered. The 2 end tables had matching brass lamps and the coffee table a stack of cork coasters on. One window at the front, another on the side, and as with the window in the next room, the blinds were mostly open. Despite being at the dark end of the house in the morning, the front room was naturally well lit. Likewise, the dining room was bright and looked lived in. The back wall of the dining room was all bookshelves, and from the gaps between the books, it was clear they were active shelves. The books on the table had been taken down recently. In the kitchen, Carol was standing at the left counter looking over a checklist. She took frozen chicken thighs out of the freezer and laid them on the back rim of the sink. She briefly looked in the cupboard above the silver 2-slot toaster, then closed the doors and checked something off her list. "Good. Now let's go say a quick hi," said Carol. "Where is he?" I asked her. "He's in the morning room," said Carol, which at first I misunderstood, explicitly hearing morning room rather than morning room. Carol led me through a door to the back right of the kitchen into a hallway. We passed a bathroom and a closed closet door before getting to the small room where Mr. Duggan was resting. The morning room was genuinely sunny and bright, infinitely more so than the front was. Mr. Duggan was in pajamas and a windbreaker, which seemed odd but then not so odd. His hair was neatly combed across the top of his forehead, but in the back stuck straight up in the air. And though an old man, for one reason or another, his hair was still mostly dark. Carol pointed out that Mr. D stares energetically at the world, but doesn't say much. Nor does he smile much. He stares like he's waiting for something important, waiting for an answer or a sign to come from things. Not an insane staring, just a wistful, thoughtful staring, as though giving his own familiar trappings reasonable, questioning stares to confirm either their loyalty to him or their disloyalty, even their possible treachery. Largely uncommunicative, every few minutes or so he speaks a single solitary word, the same word repeated, like a semi-regular cuckoo clock. "Money?" He spoke up abruptly, intoning it as a question. Again a moment later. "Money?" Bright, warm daylight wasn't quite enough, but maybe it helped. He repeats himself, not as a mad senile would, but softly, probingly, if that's a distinction. With the tenacious Mr. D, the repetition seems frequent. The word repeated as if maybe he'd forgotten whether he asked you already, or had forgotten whether you had answered him. "Money? Money?" And whose money was it? Your money? His money? Carol's money? Specific money, or simply money as a general concept? "Does he want me to give him money?" I asked Carol, when he repeated himself the first time. No, he's got plenty," Carol answered. "He just likes to ask about it. That's been his word for 3 or 4 months now." "Oh, so this is a somewhat recent phenomenon?" I asked. "Yeah, before that it was married." "Married? Married?" I repeated like a parrot. "Exactly, just the same way. A question, and an annoying one at that. And he doesn't discriminate. It's always the same word, for whoever comes in. I got sick of him saying married all the time," Carol went on, "so I told him to cut it out." Interesting. Yeah, well. After picking up a few books off the floor and lightly pinching one of Mr. Duggan's cheeks, Carol picked up his breakfast dishes and motioned toward the kitchen. "Unfortunately, this is about as much fun as it gets around here," Carol said, as if apologizing for not being a better host. She placed the dishes in the kitchen sink, then walked from the kitchen into the dining room carrying the books. In the library, I asked her about all the activity, the obvious ongoing studies taking place. "He's probably looking for the money," said Carol as a joke. But then she answered seriously. "No, he's actually reading them. At least he acts like he's reading them. I think it's a pride thing. A man who reads can't be seen. You know, don't show him your weaknesses." I doubt his comprehension skills these days, but he sure does make a good show of it. He wants me to think he's researching an important story, finding all the facts. He even dog-ears the pages. But I've checked. The pages have nothing to do with each other. I think he just wants me to wonder what big plan he's got up his sleeve. As Carol explained Mr. D's book work, I couldn't help thinking that maybe he was just looking for money, cash. As a kid, I hid $200 of lawn mowing money in one of my bookshelves and never found it. People do steal money, but not Carol, of course. Mr. D was a stroke victim, and to top it off, an old man living alone. Looking for money in books was a perfectly understandable pastime.